Satiim Vyasam Tato Jayodhya. Nishtapareshu Badveshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavatyutama Shuki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistri. Nigmal Kapurgaritam Param Shukamukaram Mita Dvisangatam Pibata Bhagatam Rasamariam Mahora Horisika Bhubi Bhagam. Vishnu Swadam Apagate Damagini Karo Nashta Dvishamasha Parana Kodinoditam. Anarto Pashamam Shakshad Bhakti Yogam Lokasajana Chakra Satpadasamitam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Kantanamostate Jayatam Sarato Pango Mamma Gati Matsavasha Param Bojaradhan Madan Mohanam Sriman Rasarasaram Vamsi Pana Karsan Vena Shinobaka Gopanata Sri Sanaham Divyad Bindarani Kapadurmada Srimad Radha Gata Shimashanishto Sri Sri Radha Shila Govinda Prashtadavi Sevamanashmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Mangalang Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guptadajam Mangalam Padidikaksham Mangalayatano Hari Om Narayana Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Vidmahi Vishnu Patni Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Saraswati Hari Priya Namastubhyam Nayadine Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Rari Vindavaneshwari Vishavanusute Devi Pranamani Hari Priya Om Agarati Mirandasya Garangana Sarakaya Chaksurun Miritam Yanatashma Shri Garave Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yarabhutare Sayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparandikam Avam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamani Stay Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunivari Paskatade Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good morning, Vallabha Chandra. Good morning, Charlie. Thanks very much for joining me on this Transcendental Tuesday. We've been talking extensively, weeks, about how it's not due to our own efforts that we can bring God within the range of our senses. There's nothing we can do to impress him. He has all wealth, all strength, all fame, all beauty, all knowledge, as well as all humility. So however much wealth or strength or influence or good looks or even humility we exhibit, God's just not impressed. But if we display childish enthusiasm to see him against all odds, you have to be naive to be successful in devotional service. You can't think of how great God is and how insignificant we are. You'll just be dragging around, dragging your feet in the dust, be having aw shucks, poor little me attitude. You have to realize that although God's great and we're small, he loves us. He made us in his image. We're made of the same stuff that he's made out of Satchidananda. He misses us. He made us in such a way as to complement him. Just like in a ring or a piece of jewelry, there's one main stone, let's say a diamond, but there's smaller green and red, emerald and saffron and amber yellow stones that set off the diamond. Krishna doesn't see himself apart from his creations. You don't see the sunshine apart from the sun. You can't think of sunshine without thinking of the sun globe. You can't think of the sun globe without thinking of the sunshine. They're part and parcel. They're complementary and supplementary. You cannot separate the one from the other. When Krishna, God, thinks of himself, he thinks of himself in connection with his devotees. One time, Prabhupada said, God has no name. We hosted a delegation from Pakistan yesterday, sponsored by the State Department, the federal government, and also the Utah Diplomacy Initiative. We do this. They send groups 2 or 3 times a year. Whenever they have touring groups from other countries, they send them to the temple as a shining example of diversity of interfaith workings. And so, forget what my point was now. Forget what my point was. Oh yeah. I mentioned that most religions they don't in Judaism they say you can't say the name of God. God is so powerful that if you say the name of God, it'll bring the house down. It'll break the pillars and cause havoc and destruction. The name of God is so powerful. And that's a very nice, respectful attitude to take. I think I think that's instructive for us to understand how powerful God is. But at the same time, there's a lot of fear permeating that attitude. God, in fact, has no name. Let's grant that. Let's grant the supposition of the Jewish people. No, they don't say that God has no name, but you can't say the name. You can't say the name because it's number one, it's presumptuous, and number two, the name is so powerful it could cause unimaginable destruction. So let's leave that. Let's leave that. Let's not say the name of God. There is no name of God. Let's go so far as say there is no name of God. And at the same time, God is known by many names. And yet, if you look at the names by which God is known, it's always in connection with his devotees. That's how Krishna defines himself. That's how Krishna sees himself. He doesn't see himself in a vacuum. What does it mean to be a powerful person? Does it mean to live in a locked room counting your money like Scrooge in the old cartoons? He would be in a room all by himself, a locked room. Nobody else could come in because he wouldn't trust him. And he's counting his money. That what would be the use of being rich and powerful without being able to use that wealth and power to interact, to show off in front of your relatives, to sponsor charitable endeavors and charitable foundations, to build not only residential buildings for you and your family, but for the public as well, performing arts centers and places to sleep and shelters along the road for travelers. What good is wealth and power if you can't use it in connection with others? So what good would it be to be God, to be living in a vacuum? God is known not by a personal name, but he's known in connection with his devotees. So therefore, Parsarati, Madhusudana, uh, Madhava, Nanda Nandana, Devaki Nandana, the son, the foster son of Yashoda, the foster son of Nanda, the son of Vasudeva, the son of Devaki, the chariot driver of Arjuna, the husband of the goddess of fortune. This is reflective of Krishna, God's own personality. He's always in connection with his devotees. But when we exhibit childlike enthusiasm, it's possible then to attract the attention of Krishna because he created us in order to have a relationship with us. And the problem is that we've turned our backs on him. We've not shown any interest in evolving our relationship with him. We've kept him at a distance. We've gone away from his own personal abode of this material world. So he's not going to force us, but he's eager, he's anxious, he's poised, he's waiting for us to invite him in. And when we invite him in, he's very happy to do so. This is what he's been waiting for who knows how many lifetimes. The single greatest qualification for success in spiritual life is not wealth or not austerity or not penances or not power, not influence or not good looks or not good birth. It's childlike enthusiasm. It's naivete. That some or other, the insignificant living being who has a spirit soul, 1/10,000 times of a tip of hair, can some or other come face to face with God and engage in him, engage with him, engage with his servants in eternal blissful spiritual activities. You have to hope against hope. But there is every hope based on the character and personality of the Lord that if we exhibit childish enthusiasm, we will be successful. Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada's guru said, act not in such a way you can see God. The ladder is too tall and we don't have what it takes. But act in such a way that God can see you. We're infinitesimal, God's infinite. It's a fact. The infinitesimal cannot bring the infinite within its realm of sense perception. But it's also a fact that the infinite being, unlimitedly powerful, capable of doing anything, can appear within the realm of our sense perception. And that's what we count on. Example is given. I heard this story by Amarendra, who said he was in Vrindavan one time in the Krishna Balaram temple, the Hare Krishna temple in Vrindavan. It throngs from morning till night with tourists from all over the world, Russian, South American, Chinese. Devotees come from all over the world, especially during the Kartik month of November. There's 7,000 to 10,000 devotees who are living in Vrindavan at that time. So one time they had arti, they had evening arti, and loud, enthusiastic chanting and dancing. Temple room was packed. People even out in the courtyard. Now the arti ended, the conch shell blew, and the priest closed the curtains. But the crowd wanted more. Crowd wanted more. Crowd didn't stop chanting at the end of arti. Continued chanting. The intensity was still there, even though the curtains were closed. In consideration of the exuberance and intensity of the crowd, the priest did something unprecedented. They opened the curtains again. That's normally never done. It's not that the crowd can come and rip open the curtains and on their own get the darshan of the deity. That's totally taboo. It's totally prohibited. The priests are the only ones who are capable of opening the curtains, and normally they don't open the curtains. When that's done, they have their own duties to do. They have to put the deities in their night clothes and take the offerings away and do cleaning and put the arti paraphernalias back and get them ready for the next. They're on a tight schedule. But on this particular day, which was during Kartik, the devotees' enthusiasm was so great. I forget whether it was Janmashtami or Kartik, but it was one of the top days of the year. Devotees' enthusiasm was so great that the priest did something extraordinary. They opened the curtain. And after some time, they closed the curtain. And when they closed the curtain, the devotees' shout was encore, basically our version of encore, encore, encore. And this happened several times. Normally, the curtain's not open at all after the arti. But on this particular special occasion, whether it's Kartik or Janmashtami, I'm not sure, repeatedly opening and closing the curtains. So this is an example of, we can't do it ourselves. We can't go up on the altar and rip open the curtain. We'd be hauled away to the police station. We'd be tackled and pinned to the ground, pummeled probably. But if the priest decide, due to the enthusiasm, the childlike enthusiasm of the audience, to open the curtains once, twice, thrice, it can be done. Along these lines, also, we talked extensively about how we don't have the qualifications also. If you want to enter into that rare place where one's permitted to render service to the servant, 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 to the servant. Even Lord Brahma says he would trade his position as Lord and creator of this universe to be a blade of grass in the spiritual world. Lord Brahma, the creator of this universe, who lives on the topmost planet, is the foremost of the demigods, would switch out his position in a moment to be a blade of grass in the spiritual world. That position is so exalted. And Lord Brahma is the most expert. He's the head of our sampradaya. He's the original teacher in our line of disciplic succession. He's the creator of the universe. He's a mystic yogi. He's an ascetic. He did tapasya in the beginning of creation for 1,000 years. He has all the qualifications. And yet, he's saying that if he could become a blade of grass in the spiritual world, he would do so immediately. So how are we to follow such a great personality as Brahma? We have to take the knowledge which is coming down, what knowledge he's given. We take that knowledge through the authorized chain of disciplic succession, and we follow his footsteps and we become qualified. There are many statements, and we've covered this point before, that it's impossible. It's impossible to be accepted into the service of the Lord. The Lord's too great, and we're too fallen, and it's been too long. And yet, if you have the qualifications, it's possible to do what is not possible for most people. For instance, if you ask an average person, you show them a vacant piece of lot, dry, dusty, no water, desiccated, withered, parched, yellow piece of lot, and you ask them to produce nice carpet of grass, produce a couple of shade trees, a couple of fruit trees, grow some flowers, as well as some fruits and vegetables. If you give them the land and ask them to do that, and then you come back 2 years later, it'll still be forsaken. It'll just be as it was because most people don't know how to take an abandoned, withered, dry piece of land and make it beautiful, make it productive. However, if you give that land to a qualified farmer who knows how to create irrigation ditches, how to access water, how to weed and sow, and what seeds to plant, and is willing to put in the time and the expertise, 2 years later, it'll come back and it'll be a food forest. It'll be an oasis of fruits and flowers and fauna and grass and all kinds of things like that. So the average person can't accomplish that. They don't have the skills, nor do they have the motivation. But that's not to say it can't be accomplished by anyone. A qualified farmer, who would be a rare person in this day and age, could accomplish that. If you ask just any person on the street, here's a mango seed. Now, give me mangoes. Take the seed and give me mangoes. They'll look at you like, well, how do I do that? How am I going to get mangoes from this seed? How am I going to get fruits? It's only a seed. Well, you have to have the skills. You have to have the knowledge, how to plant it, how to water it, how to weed it. For the average person, they think you're speaking in riddles. Here's a seed, give me a mango. They think mangoes are only, they grow in the supermarket or something. They grow in plastic packages. My average person will just look at you like you're crazy, like you're asking them to do something that's impossible. But who is a qualified farmer, he can take that seed, he can plant it in the right kind of soil, he can nourish it, he can protect it, and eventually he will be able to come back and say, you gave me a seed, you asked for a mango, here's a mango. He's giving you one mango, but meanwhile, the tree that he's grown from the seed has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mangoes. But what he's done may seem amazing. It may seem miraculous. It may seem from the onset impossible, but it's very possible, those few people who know how to cultivate, who know how to garden. So in this verse, Satvena Pratilabdha, the question is asked, who is it who's qualified in order to see the Lord? And the answer is those who are immersed, those whose consciousness is permeated, saturated with bhakti. Their only desire is to please the Lord. They're not engaged in devotional service in order to get name or fame for themselves. They're not chanting their rounds because uh, they want to get through their rounds and then spend the rest of the day on their own. They're not chanting their rounds and doing service in the temple because of fear of consequences of not chanting their rounds and doing service, fear of having broken their vows to the spiritual master, nor are they trying to kill Krishna, as we mentioned, Sister Paul was trying to do him, by doing everything in bhakti perfectly, but with the selfish motivation of getting opulences from Krishna, getting wealth and beauty and influence and power from Krishna, who is the bestower of all boons, and then allowing those opulences, those blessings, to then distract one from Krishna himself. Those in whose purview will eventually appear the Supreme Lord are those who, with pure hearts and pure intentions, desire only to please the spiritual master and to please Krishna. When you have that attitude, you're no longer in the world of duality. Yesham tu andagadam papam jnana punya te dvandvam nirmuktapta. Te dvandva. Dvandva means hot and cold, honor and dishonor, happiness and distress, up and down, front and back. says that if you're in devotional service, if you're motivated by love and not personal, not trying to avoid loss or trying to achieve gain, if your calculations are, will this please Krishna? Something that might be very pleasing to me, if it's displeasing to Krishna, then that becomes displeasing to me. That's bhakti. That's bhakti. If there's something that's displeasing to me, but it's pleasing to Krishna, bhakti means then that becomes pleasing to me. Krishna is the criterion. Krishna is the uh, the Krishna's pleasure, Krishna's personality, Krishna's preferences are the priority. And when that's the case, when your priorities are lined up in that way with the pleasure of Krishna first, then that's called bhakti. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita it says, Admendaru priti vanchi tari badakanu krishnandi priti ichi tari berimarua. Iron and gold are both metals. They're both metals. But iron is not very valuable. Iron is not wanted particularly. Whereas gold will change your whole life. Gold is a life changer. And yet they're both metals. They have that in common. So self-love, self-aggrandizement, self-promotion, that's like iron. Self-sense gratification, when one's motivations are to please one's own senses on the gross or the subtle level, that's like iron. But spiritual life doesn't mean to negate the senses, doesn't mean to destroy the ego. Senses are there, ego is there. But now the shift is from pleasing my senses to pleasing Krishna's senses. So either way, sense gratification is there. Just like whether you're talking about gold or iron, they're both metals. So in material life, sense gratification is there, and spiritual life, sense gratification is there. But the key difference, many people think material life means sense gratification, so spiritual life means no sense gratification. The problem is you can't live that way. We have senses. Our senses are eternal. Our senses come from Krishna. You can't deny the senses. Only temporarily can you repress or push down the senses. Eventually they will have their way. So a better course is to engage the senses. Therefore, we say that whether you're in material life or whether you're in spiritual life, sense gratification is there. The difference is that in material life, you're directly trying to enjoy Krishna's energies, as a thief would directly try to enjoy other people's property. But in spiritual life, you're giving everything to Krishna first. You're seeing everything through the filter of Krishna. How will my reading this book glorify Krishna? How will my seeing this movie glorify Krishna? How will my cooking this food glorify Krishna? How will my art glorify Krishna? How will my gardening skills glorify Krishna? How will my graphic arts skills glorify Krishna? How will my speaking skills glorify? How are my homemaking? How are my motherly skills or fatherly skills going to glorify Krishna? No sense gratification there, but in spiritual life, the sense gratification goes through Krishna. It's not that because we're spirituals, we don't eat. We eat, but the food is first offered to Krishna. And after Krishna enjoys not exactly the stuff of the food, he doesn't need calories to keep himself going. But that doesn't mean to say he doesn't taste the food, because what he tastes is the love, the devotion, and the recognition that everything is created by God, and therefore he's the owner, he's the proprietor, and he has the first right of enjoyment. After we offer to Krishna, then we get to enjoy beautiful food. After all, if you're offering to Krishna, you don't want to offer second, third class food because he's the supreme, he's super excellent. You want to offer him the best of what you have. Cook it under the most clean and devotional circumstances after having chosen the best samples of the fruits and flowers and vegetables that you've grown in your garden or that have been available in the market. If you can afford it, organic and chemical free, and so on and so forth. And then offer to Krishna with a pure mind and a pure heart so that Krishna enjoys the purity and the devotion with which that's offered. And then if Krishna accepts it, then we eat better than anybody. Certainly better than you can eat at the fast food windows of McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King or In-N-Out Burger. We eat sumptuous food which has been offered to Krishna, the best of everything, prepared with devotion, hygiene, punctuality, and cleanliness. And then we eat what's called the remnants of Krishna's food, which is not only nourishing and healthy, but it also removes our karma. Even if you're a vegetarian, but you don't offer your food, there's karma in that food. Because only when Krishna is the recipient, only when Krishna is the enjoyer, is the karma removed. Whoever is the end product, whoever is meant for the end enjoyment of a product, that's the one who assumes the karma. So Krishna, out of his kindness in the Bhagavad Gita, says, Patram pushpam talam tyamya, offer me in love and devotion before you eat it, for your benefit, to remove the residual karma that may be in even those vegetarian foods, grains, fruits, legumes, and vegetables. Do one thing, offer it to me first. And then out of his kindness, Krishna removes the karma. And not only is food offered to Krishna vegetarian and very low in karma, but once it's offered to Krishna, the karma is zil. The karma factor is zil. This is bhakti. It's that one step further beyond even the mode of goodness. Bhakti not only protects you from performing future sinful actions, once everything is filtered through the pleasure of Krishna, once that's the question you ask yourself before you make any decisions, before you engage in any paths or endeavors, you ask, is this going to please Krishna? And because you've asked that question, you've sincerely tried to pursue that with integrity, then you don't, from henceforward, you don't incur any future sinful activities. Everything is filtered through Krishna, and there's no reaction, there's no blowback, there's no feedback. But not only does it do that, not only does that mode of thinking insulate you and protect you from planting bad seeds and messing up your future, but it also takes the very desire from within the heart to make wrong decisions in the future. This is what is known as karma nidhati. Karma nidhati. Let's say with all sincerity and all intention, you make a decision to serve Krishna in a certain way, like Arjuna did. Arjuna decided to follow Krishna's advice and go ahead and fight in the Kurukshetra war. Fight for right, fight for truth, fight for compassion, fight against his relatives and friends who are all on the dark side. Now, from a social point of view, Arjuna got condemnation. Critics said, how can you kill your teacher? He made you what you are. You are who you are today because of your teacher, Bhishma and Drona. How can you kill your cousin brothers? Fratricide, infanticide, matricide, patricide. They throw all these words around, all these condemnatory words to Arjuna. Arjuna, you're the lowest of man. You're ungrateful. You're a sinner. You're a dacoit. This is what people would say about Arjuna. But because he's under the instructions of Krishna, it doesn't really matter what anyone says because he's working under God. He's not working under men. When Arjuna fought, he killed people. He lopped off heads and arms and took the lives of fathers and husbands, grandfathers. And yet he did not incur any karma because he was doing it on the order of Krishna. This is called karma nidhatu. Neither did he want to do anything other than on the order of Krishna. He didn't want to opt out of the fight because he thought he would then be responsible for the sins that the people he didn't stop would go on to commit. He didn't want to fight because he wasn't attracted by defeating his enemies and gaining the kingdom and living an opulent lifestyle. So from the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna shows that his consideration is not self-centered because there are pros and cons to fighting and not fighting so far as his own ego is concerned. That's why at the point at which he turns to Krishna, he's basically paralyzed. He doesn't want to enrich himself by gaining a kingdom at the cost of his relatives' blood on the one hand. On the other hand, he says, let them kill me unarmed and resisting, because I don't know how I could live after having killed my relatives. So either circumstance, Arjuna is not making his calculations on the basis of his own selfish interests. He turns to Krishna and he says, Karpanya dosho patasha bahapachami damdam yaksayasya nishri buddhi sishasteham sarimamtam prapanam. Krishna, I don't want to make this decision from my own personal interest point of view. I want to know what you think. I want to do what you tell me to do because I know that working under your instructions means that though the whole world condemn me, though the whole world call me bad names, I'll be protected. You and I, Krishna, Arjuna says, are a majority. Krishna has the last say. So we don't care what people say. We just want to know what Krishna says, because that's the path, that's the only path which is karma free. Prabhupada gave the example of a soldier. If a soldier in peacetime stands out in the middle of the road and shoots his machine gun, kills people, he'd be condemned to death. It'll be a heinous crime. There'll be no condemnation, which is too great for someone who does that, just mows people down in peacetime. But that same soldier in war, if he does the same thing to the enemy, not only will he not be condemned, he'll probably get a medal. He'll probably get an award. So what Arjuna would normally have been condemned for doing, killing his relatives and his friends, not only was he not condemned, but he was awarded. We glorify his decision to follow what Krishna said 5,000 years ago. So that's bhakti. That's sat mena pratilabdhita. Those are those who are qualified, who attract the attention of Krishna and who are going to see Krishna in the very soon, near future. They do what others are unable to do. They transcend the limits of relative mundane morality and make their decisions based on the directions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why we're talking about Arjuna 5,000 years later. That's why we're glorifying Arjuna, because he has the skill, he has the expertise to do everything in bhakti, even though it appears as if a devotee is doing the same thing as a non-devotee, side by side, living in a house, going to work, raising a family, going on vacations. The difference is not necessarily in the activity itself, but in the intention, the inner dynamics. Devotee works hard and gives 10% of its paycheck to Krishna, donates time in the temple on the weekends or in the evening to do the arti. In our Salt Lake City temple, congregational members take 1 day a week and they go in there and they do the arti, they prepare the offering, they clean the arti utensils, they do everything, they sing the arti, they give class if necessary. They do this as a part of their regular job and raising a family. This is an extra responsibility they assume in order that their lives be consecrated, that they introduce that karma-free element of bhakti. Without bhakti, whatever other qualities you have, you're not going to be successful. And once you develop a taste for following the instructions of Krishna, you develop a history. You see that, well, I had a tendency to do this, or my so-called friends told me to do this, but I wanted to do something different because I think that would have pleased Krishna. And when we do it, when we go against the tide and make the Krishna-centered decision, we see how Krishna reciprocates, how Krishna blesses us with joy, freedom from tension, freedom from sorrow. He makes crooked ways straight. So when you do that once, then you want to do it again. And when you've done it twice, you want to do it a third time. When you do it, you want to do Viparashantu Shashatatatata, you guys Guru Bhavatom Yashanam Punar Bhavadarshanam. Queen Kunti went through so many troubles and so many tribulations. A non-trained, an untrained materialist might have thought, you know, Kunti got nothing but misery and suffering because of her attachment to Krishna. But here's what Kunti said after Krishna had brought her and her sons through so many dangers, unscathed, and delivered them from their enemies and restored their throne. Kunti's final analysis was like this: Krishna's going back to his city now, having protected his devotees, Kunti and her 5 sons, every step of the way. Krishna mounted his chariot bound for Dwarka. Queen Kunti's heart pounded, sadness abounded. Krishna's prayer took flight, a soulful flea, bittersweet. Krishna, protector of Dharma, our guiding light, by our side in every fight. Your lotus eyes, your lotus feet shining so bright, illuminating our path through many a dark night. When you're gone, our deeds and fame will fade, Pandavas and Yadavas in sorrow shade. Your footprints graced our kingdom's ground. When you're gone, darkness will surround. Kunti says, I'm on my knees, my Lord, full of awe. You're the original person, without any flaws. Within and without, in the big and the small, apart from material laws, invisible to all. Let trials repeat if it means seeing your face, for seeing you means no more birth, no more death in this endless race. Your presence, our liberation. In every place, Kunti's heart sings, your glories we embrace. Kunti's prayer a soulful plea, trials and triumphs, your grace we see. In devotion's path we get set free as the Ganges flows from the high mountains to the sea. Let our love, Lord, rush to your lotus feet. Retracing our steps, you save us from poison cakes, house set ablaze, exiles, displacement, blazing battles, cannibals chase. You shielded Draupadi from disgrace. On the Kurukshetra plains, you erased our enemies. No trace remains. Let trials repeat if it means seeing your face. No more death, no more death. In this endless place, your presence, our liberation, every place. Kunti's heart sings. Your glories we embrace. Ashwatthama's weapon you turned away. Let calamities repeat if it means you'll stay. For seeing you means no more rebirth, a gift greater than all the treasures of this earth. Those who chant your name both day and night see your lotus feet in purest light. You're easy to reach for the weary soul. But those who are after heaven's long life and gold, they can't approach you, their hearts are cold. You belong to the poor, material exhaustion, the path to your door. Ashwatthama's weapon you turned away. Let calamities repeat if it means we see you stay. For seeing you means no more rebirth, a gift greater than all the treasures of this earth. Kunti's prayer, a soulful plea. Let through trials and tribulations, your grace we see. In devotion's path, we are set free. As the Ganges rushes from the high Himalayas to the sea, let our love flow eternally, Lord, at your lotus feet. Kunti was protected, sheltered, as if by an umbrella from storms, throughout all the years of their trials and tribulations, seeing Krishna in every critical situation. And as she said, seeing Krishna means no more birth, no more death. Devotional service is not only so powerful that it protects us from reactions of past sinful activities, but it uproots the very desire to make bad decisions in the future. Even if one is condemned by all of society, even if society says, oh, you shouldn't have made that decision, you should have made this decision, still, because Krishna is the criterion, one is protected from sinful activities. This is a dynamic that goes on. We develop our history. We develop our history with Krishna. We make the tough decisions. We don't always go with the flow. We make a stand based on Krishna consciousness. We endure abuse and criticism, gossip, negative words, and even curses from the public in order to stand fast for Krishna, because we know that Krishna has protected us in the past, he's protected us in the present, and he will continue to protect us in the future. Devotees develop a history, a rich and prolific and varied history with Krishna. So when one is more advanced than you, it means that he has been making the right decisions, even extending back through his past life. And when you watch him, how such a person talks, how such a person walks, how their faith in Krishna is based on practical experience, an archive of instances where Krishna whisked them away at the very point of danger. They're cavalier, throwing themselves into danger, taking risks, stretching their faith, getting out of the boat, trying new things because they know that this is what pleases Krishna. This is a dynamic that goes on forever. Krishna always has newer and newer things out in front of us. He works in newer seasons. He's a fresh, blooming youth with a flute to his lips and a mischievous look in his eye. If you get into the Krishna program, it'll be eternal. You're not doing something in order to get something else. And then when you get it, you leave the means behind. The means and the end are the same. Every other endeavor, there's a means and there's an end. And once you achieve the end, then you drop the means. You reach a point of expiration. You reach a point where your practice causes your consciousness to expand to a certain point, but then you reach an end point. You reach a point of expiration. You reach a point of exhaustion. For instance, karma yoga, doing good, righteous, philanthropic, charitable activities on earth, accumulates for the performer a lot of good karma. One gets a karmic bank balance in the positive. One's account is in the black and not in the red. And the reward for that is that when you leave this body, you go and enjoy life, a higher standard of living, a longer life on the heavenly planets. But every day you're on the heavenly planets, you're spending the currency that you earn while on Earth. And when all that credit is exhausted, then you have to come back down. So if you expand up to the heavenly planets, but then there's a point of expiration, and then you retract and have to take birth again on the middle planet. So you're really back where you started again. Jnana, if you take a slightly higher path and pursue philosophy and knowledge, that path will destroy ignorance. So you learn, you study, you recite mantras, you become very, very expert in your thinking, you write, you discipline yourself in a scholastic way as a philosopher and as a scholar. The result is there's very little ignorance left in your life. Your decisions are based on the principle of higher life, more refined life, cultivated life. But then once you've destroyed ignorance, that's it. Where do you go? Where does that leave you? You no longer act being prompted by the mode of ignorance, but then what are you left with? If you go out one door, where have you gone? You should go from one room to another room if the room to which you're going offers more opportunities, more enrichment and betterment. But the path of knowledge only destroys ignorance. But what does it give you on the positive side of things? So you expand your knowledge, you destroy ignorance, like the expansion of light. The more light expands, the more darkness has to retreat. The more light there is, or less darkness. But then once everything's light, then what do? What is there for you to do? See? So the process of jnana and karma, they take you to a certain point, and then they basically just fizzle out. They basically play out. But bhakti goes on forever. It's the eternal function. Ado shada tato sadasang tato bhajana tato narta natmiti shat ata shaktish tatavadas tatavavas prabhyanatu. Starting from faith, starting from a little bit of faith and interest in what devotees are doing, then extending to spending more time with devotees and less time with materialistic people, and in the association of devotees very easily, giving up anarthas, giving up bad habits like illicit sex, drinking, smoking, gambling, and intoxication, and then getting an attachment to Krishna and attachment to Krishna's devotees, just like a fish eventually can't live without water, and then finally going up through ecstasy, experiencing ecstatic motions in the service of Krishna, knowing this is so right, this is so good, this is so joyful, this is eternal. Its very nature is relishable. Every aspect of devotional service is fun and enjoyable and fulfilling and uplifting. And then finally to prem. And in all of this, you're building your history, you're notching your stick, and it just goes on eternally. It goes on eternally. What you do in bhakti in this life continues from where you left off in the next life. So we're always following those who are more seasoned. We're always following the veterans, the previous gurus, the six Goswamis, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, Bhaktivinoda, Bhaktisiddhanta, and our spiritual master Prabhupada. And we're praying, let us just keep pace. We're never going to come up abreast of you. We're never going to pass you because you have so much more history. You've made so many more decisions. You've stretched your faith so much more than we do. But we don't know Krishna. Krishna is too exalted. But if I can just keep from losing sight of my guru, if I can keep the dust of his feet within my vision, that means I'll keep moving forward. I'll keep moving forward. And that momentum never ends. You never come to a point of rest. You never come to a point of expiration. You never come to a point where bhakti plays out. It is, in fact, the life of the soul, and that life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. So we'll discuss this a little bit more tomorrow. There are some more points to be made in this connection as well. But let's see who's joined us and what they have to say on this Transcendental Tuesday. Shali, thank you. Newly installed altar down there in Ephraim. Looks gorgeous and beautiful. Vallabha Chandra, Haribo, Bye Bobby. Incidentally, we're picking up another devotee tomorrow. Tomorrow's Gita Jayanti. Tomorrow's the day that the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Lord Krishna. There will be an observance in the Salt Lake City temple of some magnitude. From 5 to 7, they're reading the entire 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita and then having a special arti. I'll be picking up Gopinath Priya, newly arrived from Mayapur, at 4:40 at the airport. We'll go to the temple in Salt Lake City to participate in the Bhagavad Gita celebrations. And then I'll bring him here for a couple days and then back on Saturday for the program. So if you're in Salt Lake City, by all means, I encourage you to come at least for part of the Gita recitation. If they start at 5 and end at 7, at least come 6:30 or so for the last part of it in the arti. Here in Spanish Fork, I believe Bhai Bhavi will just read the 108 principal slokas of the Bhagavad Gita and then have a special arti. So tomorrow will be a momentous day. Yeah. So Vallabha Chandra has written here, God's names are associated with his devotees because with them he is most at ease. He is not so impressed with wealth, knowledge, or austerities. It's those in devotion who he's most pleased to see. Nice. God's names are associated with his devotees because with them he is most at ease. Nice rhyme there. He's not so impressed with wealth, knowledge, or austerities. It's those in devotion who he's most pleased to see. And there's another one here also. Are you using your skills for worship or cheap thrills? Are you working in devotion or self-promotion? Are you after devotional gold or is it material iron you've been sold? Are you using your skills for worship or cheap thrills? Are you working in devotion or for self-promotion? Are you after devotional gold or is it material iron you've been sold? And a little two-liner here, zinger from Shali. Let your ego go and hold tight to Krishna's goal. Let your ego go and hold tight to Krishna's goal. Nice. Thank you all for participating, jumping in and lending your creative skills to our own. That's what makes this a fun gathering, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. So we've got one more day left this week, which will be tomorrow morning. We'll continue this nectarine discussion further on the morrow, and then later on that day, we will welcome another full-time devotee to our Salt Lake City temple and celebrate the speaking of the Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna to his friend and disciple Arjuna 5,300 years ago at Salt Lake City in a major way, and Salt Lake City in our own way as well. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram.